My experience with Datura stramonium, dry autumn seeds, was synchronistic with my expanding awareness. It marks a gateway from the world I was reared in and the world I now walk in. Without an extensive history of my growth, from pre-puberty to the day I ingested the sacred plant, simply recounting the experience itself would be fruitless. I will spare the reader great detail, but some history should be shared. It was autumn, and I was 20 when I consumed the seeds of a withered Jimson weed plant in a field of shale in the foothills of Appalachia. I had been wondering for months already, after leaving my anthropology studies in college, in search of something real. My life to that point seemed to be a cycle of rearing, then disillusionment, and I had reached a weary state, after turning my back on my faith at 15, my belief in history's interpretations and philosophy at 17, my world view and lifestyle with its effects at 19, and even my ability to conceive at 20, I felt naked and alone in a very cold world. I was living as a vagrant and wandered away, only away. From all that was familiar, it all seemed ill. I had been fasting and having dreams with meaning that led me to asceticism. I had lived as a vegan for some time. When I ate at all, I felt like I had been infected by the original sin, even if that was something so abstract that it couldn't be rationalized. I was ready to die, but I didn't even have the volition to push myself that far. The dreams showed me glimpses of something that I felt closer to in the wilderness. When my friend from childhood told me that he had spoken to animals while under the influence of Datura, I needed no more motivation. I could feel it was in order immediately. I wish I had the proper venue to explain more, as I feel that sharing would be correct. I consumed the seeds of a withered seed pod or two, which would amount to a heaping tablespoon, and about 4 hours later the experience began. The onset involved losing touch with material reality. Things appeared, disappeared, and seemed in between constantly. I didn't have any concern, though I was a totally detached observer. Then I lost touch with my body. My legs wobbled, my arms went farther or not as far as I seemed to wield them. I felt like I was swaying when I was not. No concern for me still. Then a great many visitors came and spoke to me. It seemed as though people I have known throughout my past were coming back and reminding me of lessons I learned. Mythical characters, holy men, teachers, fictitious characters, even TV personalities, past masters, all reminded me of insights that I gained from them. This lasted for hours. As my friend later told me, he was sober. I recall at the end of this, they might just stand beside me silently, and I could see a light behind them, and simply knew what they meant. Then, an overpowering urge to urinate carried me to the toilet. I emptied a chalky white stream into the bowl and sighed heavily, and all of a sudden, my mind was clear. I didn't know what was happening. This is when I entered what I will call a dream state. I opened the door to the restroom, and the other side was vacant. I recall feeling as if a woman were embracing me, and I fell into her cloak. I caught a glimpse of her face and amulet just before falling. She was earthy and old. This is when things became too abstract to recount. With mind, I recall feeling as if I was falling in whichever direction I struggled against. I so exerted myself that I then decided to give up and just fall. It was after a period of intense fear and struggle at the prospect of falling that I realized I was floating, and the more I let go, the more I was cradled. There is a period after that I won't explain, because I feel only I understand it. What I can explain next was feeling the moonlight like a shower of cool warmth. I set out and roamed the hills, abandoning my keys, wallet, and shoes along the way. They felt so heavy. I recall speaking using a vibrational voice to plants of all kinds. They would make me feel their place in life's web, and taught me about mine. It was like visiting a place I'd never been, and knowing everyone already. It was beyond description. I felt at peace. I recall resting under the moon, and then noticing a tick on me. Then 2, then 5, and I couldn't swipe them off. They crawled furiously toward my head. At first I accepted it, as I had accepted falling, but as I began to think about the situation, it brought dread to mind. By then, these ticks and other crawling bugs were crawling into my nose, ears, mouth, eyes, every orifice. The more I decided to panic, the more I did, and I could feel my airways being choked. Then, as if the feminine character with the cloak was whispering to me, I let go again and accepted death. At that very moment, every crawling thing that was choking me was transformed into a ladybug, and in a wisp of red in the moonlight filtered away. I was quiet again. Then, approaching from a distance, a dance by a feline-like feminine figure. It was incredible, and I was deeply moved. Acrobatic yet smooth and flowing, I was entranced. Then I realized she was a shadow. I realized that shadows all around me had begun to dance, so I joined them. There was visual music, and all around the shadows danced. They taught me to dance like them, and I felt so grateful that I cannot explain. There is another mysterious period here, a blur of abstract events. I then spoke to a dog for some time. Strange as it may sound, at first he was an old farmer, leaning against a truck. He would nod as I told him things, mostly my deep feelings of goodness in seeing him well, which didn't seem strange at all. Then, gradually, he responded more and more by turning his head and barking an old bloodhound type bark. This too seemed normal. He told me of his life and how he longed to feel wild again before he passed. He was very old. He conveyed to me that I would do well to embrace a mystery within all things, even my own being. I understood then, but later when sobered, had to meditate long to reach this again. I bid him adieu and wandered further. There is another phase now, which is a mixture of seeing things in stages of decay. It is very difficult to convey, but amounts to the fact that all is perpetually thriving and decaying, always. The next I recall, I was talking to a man in his house, which I had wandered into. Later he told me that I woke him up by entering, and he asked what I was doing there, and to get out. My response was an expression of innocence, recoiling from brutality. He said I examined everything in the room closely. At that time I recall seeing them as relics, and then settling on his sofa and talking to him. Being well experienced with psychedelic experiences himself, he relaxed and tried to get information about me. I recall him asking where I was from, and this is when normal processes began to return. I could tell him what state and city I was from, but what he wanted to know was from where did I wander to his house. He asked me how I got there, and I told him my car. He asked what car, and I pointed to his. It really looked like the car I once owned. At the time, later, he heard me muttering to myself about things that seemed to remind him of a book he was reading concerning the Akashic record, which I am still not familiar with, not even its spelling. Eventually, I felt I could walk back to my starting point. I then recall seeing the cloaked woman once more upon returning to my friend's home, but on second glimpse, seeing it was a heap of trash bags. This experience lasted 3 days, an utter time warp. I later found out that neighbours had seen me wandering in horse pastures, seeming to play like a small child might. I was mud encrusted, up to my knees and dirty all over, just wearing pants. I still have the impact of these events with me today. I know how to let go. I know how to let life flow through me. My life was greatly enriched. I feel being delusioned and ready to die was what kept me afloat during this experience. Would I have choked to death if I hadn't? The feminine aspect of all things has become a most fascinating and revered part of my life. The mystery has returned. I may never use Datura again. I don't hear the voice. As you can see, it is among the most risky trips I have ever encountered. After studying its traditional use, it is quite clear why that time was right. Yet, I will never suggest someone use it the way I did. Datura is beyond psychedelic.